I can't remember. We were watching the Montreal race from 2008 last week, and we talked about it. And we're like, I remember Brad Coleman. I'd love to chat with him about that. So figured I'd shoot you DM, and here you are. So yeah.
Yep, I saw that y'all posted about that race, and it brought back nightmares.
Well, we'll talk.
Yeah,
We'll talk all about it. Yeah. So, but again, yeah. Thanks so much for joining us. We basically just want to talk about your career and coming up during the driver development era of NASCAR because it's such an era we find interesting. We talked to Landon Castle about it quite a bit, and it was a really weird era where like fans, in a way, I've always thought were kind of spoiled by the amount of talent that was coming up, and it was crazy. There weren't enough rides for everybody, and everyone had a development program, and it was just crazy. But looking at your case in particular, you know, you came up at an incredibly young age with not a lot of stock car background. And I was doing some research, and the legend goes that you were actually discovered at an indoor karting center by Price Cobb. Is that true?
yeah. Price actually. I mean, I was 12 years old, and I went and lived with him for the summer. He had I don't know if y'all remember Toyota Atlantic Series way back in the day. He had one of those teams, and I got to travel with him for the summer after meeting him, and like I just was bit by the bug, and that was my first time to get in like a real go-kart, like not the indoor karting, but get in a real go-kart on a track. I got destroyed. I spun out all the time, but I loved it, and he ended up being my coach for quite a while. He's a really cool dude.
I want to talk to you about junior formula because like racing, you say Atlantics, things like that. So we have a mostly like a road racing and like, well, mostly NASCAR based. Most of our videos are about. And can you talk a bit about those junior formulas that you would have raced in and the tracks you would have gone to and just how that whole scene works? Cause it's something that maybe like our followers it's not something that they know a lot about it.
Yeah, it's actually really cool. The junior formula cars, as you call them, they're like for people that don't have any idea, they're like smaller Indy cars or Formula One cars. I mean, I was 14 years old when I first got in one, and those things would do like 135 miles an hour. I thought that was like the fastest thing ever. And I'm like, I'm going 135. And it was crazy because there was one track I raced at where you had to be 16 to actually walk on pit road, and that's where the grid was. So I wasn't actually allowed to walk to my car. I had to get in my car in the garage and then drive it out to pit road and stay in it. So it was really weird. But the Formula cars, I raced on tracks like Laguna Seca, Sebring, Road America. I mean, all the big road courses in the U.S. I was doing that, and they're a lot of fun. They are faster than like stock cars for sure on road courses. Way more grip. I think stock cars are super fun to drive on road courses though because they're so hard. But yeah, it was a lot of fun racing those things.
What were the car counts like back then? Like, did you have like a lot of competition? Were there a diverse amount of drivers from different backgrounds? You know, tell us about the competition you faced there.
In the Formula cars?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the guy who was dominating when I was in it was Michael McDowell. We
Wow.
raced in the Pro Mazda series together, and we did 10 races. I think he might have won 7 or 8 of them. Like he was just really good. And what's cool is the year before that, when I was doing a smaller Formula car, he was actually my coach at the team I was at. So I know Michael pretty well, and it is cool to be able to go up the ranks with him and see him still in NASCAR. He's a really cool dude. But I mean, the competition was tough. You had people from Europe, you had people from Canada, Mexico, the United States. I mean, it was all the best go-karters now racing in cars because there's so many different areas to race go-karts around the world. Like it's huge in Europe, and they come over because they want to race Indy cars or stuff like that, and it's super competitive. I learned all about blocking, which is super frustrating. Like being blocked is really annoying. And that's one thing I loved about getting in stock cars is if someone blocked you, you could actually touch them without a wheel falling off and just keep going. So that was fun.
You came to prominence. There were articles written in 2005 when you did the Rolex 24 because you were on a team with Colin Brown and I believe who's the other drivers? Ross Bentley, who was 49 at the time. But then your other two teammates were, I believe, 16 and 17, along with yourself at age 16. So your average age was 24. And that's, I believe, the youngest team that's ever competed in the Rolex 24 in a Porsche Cup car. So what was that experience like, and how did that deal get put together?
Yeah, that was really cool because Colin actually started racing in that same Pro Mazda series towards the end of the season, the same one that me and Michael were in. And we had known the other driver was named Adrian Cario. We had known him from go-karts. He had done a little Formula car racing as well. And just we had thrown around the idea how cool it would be to do that. And then our dads just worked it out, found a team, found the finances to make it happen. And it was so cool. That's definitely one of the highlights of my career. That was my first time to be on the track at Daytona, was doing that. And like the first time you go on the banking, it's insane. Like you think of all the races you've watched there, and you think of all the people that have raced on it. I never imagined I would actually be on it in a NASCAR race. But it was so cool. And I remember at the drivers meeting, it was a huge drivers meeting. There's so many drivers in that race in the 24 hours. They were talking about the rules of, okay, when we go into nighttime, here's when you turn on your lights, here's the protocol. And someone had made a comment of like, well, Team 16 is not going to need their lights because they're not going to make it that far. And we really saw that as a challenge. And going into nighttime, it's like midnight or 1 a.m., we're sitting in either second or third. So that was a really cool event. I think one of the craziest things is you share the car with people. So you drive for an hour and a half, 2 hours, you get out, someone else is driving your car. That was something I had never experienced. And you even like go off and sleep because you need to rest so that you're fresh. So I go to sleep and I wake up, I'm like, so how's the car doing? Like, I have no idea where we are in the race. It's such a cool experience.
Do you remember which stints you were driving for that particular Rolex? Were you in the night sessions in the morning, or did you like start the car?
So I didn't start it. I remember I did one. I did either 2 or 3. Man, that was 16 years ago. So my memory on that was half of my life, which is crazy to think about. I do know that I finished it. I was the guy that brought it across the finish line, which was really cool. I did a 2 a.m. stint, which was awesome. That just getting out there in the lights. That was my first time to race at nighttime, which is always my favorite. Like anytime we had a NASCAR race at night, I loved that. Like I loved being under the lights. That was always my favorite.
And you guys, so you ended up finishing, I think it was 7th in class, 6th in class.
Yeah.
So like not too shabby, but Colin Brown being your teammate, like you guys both ended up being in NASCAR. He was with Ford's development program. You were at JGR at the time. Like, was that something that was even on either of your guys' radar at that point in your careers?
It was one of those things where it's like, yeah, that'd be cool to do that. We would love to do it, but is it really going to happen? Like it takes a lot of work to get to that level. So just knowing one person that makes it, that you race with growing up, is super cool, let alone all the people I raced with that actually ended up making it. Now Colin has a super successful road racing career. He's one of the best out there. But yeah, it was cool because I remember when we were doing Team 16, we went to the Roush Yates engine shop because they were the ones supplying our motors once we started racing prototypes. And we were talking to Doug Yates and just dreaming like, wow, one day to drive one of these stock cars would be so cool. And then just a couple of years later, we're racing each other, and it was awesome. I always loved racing against him. He races super hard, and he was definitely one of my best friends in that time.
No, that's great. I have to ask, like, you talked about prototypes. So every time we have somebody on that has raced the Daytona prototype, I have the model right there. Was that car a piece of junk to drive? Because it seems to be a mixed bag. Some people think it's crappy. Wally Dallenbach said it was one of the worst cars he's ever driven in his life. But you would have driven at the time when it was a sequential and everything, right? It was very much more, it wasn't as refined as they were in later years.
Yeah, it's hard to judge because when we raced it, I was like 16 and 17, and I didn't have much experience driving just amazing cars. Like I'd driven the smaller Formula cars. I drove the Porsche GT3 Cup car, which at the time a lot of people said were hard to drive and not super easy. But the prototype was just the fastest thing I had driven at the time. So to me, it felt incredible. I remember they were like, it has 600 foot-pounds of torque, 600 horsepower. And I mean, it had a V8, man, that thing roared. It was incredible. You sat on the right side, which was totally crazy being from the US, like never driven a car on the right side, had the sequential and everything. It was, uh, it was a really great car. I didn't think it was crappy. It would have been fun to get back in it after, like, towards the end of my career, after everything I had driven and just like gotten a feel for it. If I had to compare it to driving like a stock car on a road course, I mean, the Daytona prototype is way better, like way better.
I guess when the measuring bar is a stock car, it's easy to like say, it's way better than a stock car. But like you speak about the torque, you come from the Porsche Cup car, which is a very tail happy car. You got to slide it a little bit to getting off. What was that kind of transition going into a prototype with 600 horsepower, and the second you get on the throttle, you could light up the rear tires?
Yeah, I think it had only like, it had so much torque and power that they only had 5 gears in it, I think, which was pretty crazy. I could be totally wrong, but I could be right. And so they were really long gears, so it wouldn't really light up the tires that easily. The tires were huge too, like super wide. And yeah, I just remember being at Virginia International Raceway, VIR, which is a beautiful track, super fun to drive. The S's are some of the most intimidating things I ever drove in that prototype. And just coming out of like the oak tree turn, which is the hairpin at one end of the track, the torque of just ripping out of that corner. And I was like 16 or 17 years old. I mean, it was the coolest feeling. And I mean, I'm getting like chills just thinking about it because I had so much fun driving that car, especially at that age. It's just, my friends are all in school, they're doing whatever. And I'm like, hey, I got to be gone this weekend. I'm racing.
And did you have any aspirations though, like after doing Daytona and some more sports car stuff of like doing that for your career? Like, do you ever think about like, maybe I want to go to Le Mans or I want to win Daytona or I want to do this for a living?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, honestly, I wanted to be a Formula One driver. Like that was what I wanted to do. I watched NASCAR, but my dream was to race in Formula One. Like that was the pinnacle to me. And so when I started racing, I raced go-karts on road courses. I raced Formula cars. Like I was on that route. And then after the 24 Hours of Daytona, I ended up meeting somebody. It's actually Peyton Sellers, who I'm sure y'all know.
We had him on our podcast.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I met him and his family and got into one of his stock cars. And that was just totally different. I'd never raced oval stuff, anything like that. That was probably the most scared I'd ever been in a race car, was racing those for the first time, just how close everyone was on a short track. Because the road course stuff just gets spread out. It's not really that intimidating. Yeah, but so at that point is when I decided, like, well, stock car, there's like, it's just, to be honest, it was just easier to make it. Like, to make it as a Formula One driver, especially as an American, that is almost impossible. But to make it in stock car seemed like a more doable route. And I wanted to race professionally, so I went that way.
Yeah, and we hear that from a lot of guys that we've talked to, guys like Josh Balicki. There's just, my money will go farther in stock cars. So that's why I decided to go that route. And it makes sense. There's more rides available for less money. The other thing I just want to quickly ask you is like, so I found this article, no idea if this is true, but it said that you were the youngest person ever in the US to earn a professional open wheel license. Can you confirm or deny that?
I can confirm that at the time that was true. I don't know if it's still true.
Wow. So 14 years old, you had a professional open wheel license. And what do you have to get the professional license for? Like Atlantics or Indy Lights or?
It was for I don't even know if they're around anymore. NASA, which was like SCCA.
Yeah, they're still around.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So that was the race, Formula Renault cars.
Oh, okay.
They had little 1600cc engines in them. Super cool. I mean, I went from racing little go-karts to those. They had sequential gearbox, buttons on the steering wheel. I thought it was like I was racing Formula One. I loved it.
Those are like the cars with no wings, right?
So those actually did.
Oh, those did. Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking of F1600.
1600s did not.
Okay. That's what I'm thinking of. That's what's really popular where I am, is F1600.
Yeah.
So, Your
That's crazy.
transition. Sorry, go ahead, James.
That's okay. No, I was just going to say, it seems like right at this point in your career, your definitely trajectory is going towards open wheel racing. You know, you get into go from go-karts, get in your first car, which is an open wheel car, then you transition into sports cars, and then from there you transition into stock cars. But like you stated, you had a session with Peyton. You got to run his car a little bit. But how did the ARCA deal come about? Because it just seemed like you went from sports cars to ARCA, but did you have any short track experience in between there?
Yeah, I did a year of late model racing at Ace Speedway, who I think has been in the news for funny stuff recently with
Hmm. Yeah.
calling the race a protest or whatever. So they had fans out, which I think is hilarious. And that was quite the experience. I went from so when I raced like Pro Mazda, and it was tagged up or teamed up with American Le Mans at the time. So it was super fancy. You're going to Laguna Seca. It's beautiful. You know, they have all these fancy events going on. And then I go from that, the 24 Hours of Daytona, this prestigious race, to racing a short track in the middle of North Carolina, where my first ever race, like halfway through the race, all of a sudden the caution comes out. This guy starts doing donuts under caution at the start finish line, just doing a burnout, doing donuts. And he stands up on his roof and just flips off the crowd. And I'm like, what is going on here? And then he drives off. And apparently he was associated with the tow truck company. So all the tow trucks leave. So the race gets red flagged for like 2 hours so they can find more tow trucks to come back. I went from racing this fancy stuff to that, and I was like, what is happening?
What kept you what drew you into it though? I mean, you spoke a little bit about the competition, being able to race side by side, also having closed fendered cars where you didn't have to really worry about repercussions when you made contact. What else drew you into stock car racing?
I mean, once the decision was made that like, hey, that's the path that makes most sense. I mean, it was okay. What do I have to do? Well, I have to actually drive these things, and the short track racing is the way to get into it. I did a whole year at Ace Speedway with that. And you asked about ARCA. I honestly don't remember how I got connected with Bruco Motorsport. Excuse me, Bruco Motorsports, who I raced with. I remember meeting them at Charlotte Motor Speedway, like in the fall. We were at a race, just walking around the garage, dreaming, thinking that'd be so cool to be doing this one day. And we somehow met the guys at Bruco and talked to them, and then talks just kept going. And I went from racing short track one year to doing ARCA all of a sudden, being on these big speedways, learning how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you went to big speedways. You went from a speedway to like mile and a half. And it's weird because like when I look at your ARCA resume, I look at Salem. That's the only like blemish on your initial ARCA venture. But I mean, Salem is a tough place. That's a hard track. So whatever happened happened. But I mean, you didn't have a finish that was worse than fifth in like 8 starts in ARCA on
Yeah.
intermediate tracks that you've never known about. Like, what was that transition like to go from a short track to literally a huge super speedway?
I loved it. It was so fun. Those ARCA cars were a blast to drive. They had huge spoilers, so you could just get in the corner and just crank it. They weren't loose or at all. But yeah, I mean that was just a really good year. Like crazy. Like what was it? Like 9 races, 8 top 5s, or something like that. 3 or 4 poles. And then the one like you were talking about Salem, I actually qualified on the pole by like half a second or something at Salem, which is this crazy short track that is the scariest track I've ever been on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was leading the race by like half a lap, and on a restart, I don't remember if I missed a shift or spun the tires, but I just got wrecked out of the lead. And then Salem doesn't have a tunnel or a bridge, so I ended up just sitting in the infield watching the rest of the race just unfold. That was not fun.
But this was ARCA at a time when ARCA was very competitive. This is not like now where there's like 5 cars that can win. This was like I remember there was races with 50 cars. and at least half of them had a shot to win. And there would have been other guys racing in that time on development contracts that you would have raced against that would have been very good. And you're incredibly competitive with your 62 Bruco team, and you got the one win like at Kentucky. And what was that like? Was that just vindicating to get that oval win? Especially having very little experience.
Yeah, I remember my first race. I got second at Nashville to Stephen Light, foreshadowing. And that was like, wow, I can actually win in this thing, because I had no idea how I would be doing this. And then at Kansas, a couple races later, I got the pole and I was leading, and then a caution came out late. Everyone behind me pitted for tires, and I didn't. So I was just a sitting duck. I think I still got top 5 at that race, but that was really frustrating. The next race was at Kentucky, and I somehow got off sequence in pit stops and ended up like 2 laps down with like 40 laps to go, and earned 1 lap back, got another one in caution, I think. And with like 10 laps to go, I think I'm in 8th or 9th. And at the time, it was single file restarts. And once the green flag dropped, you were allowed to just dig on the outside. So someone got checked up, and instead of letting up, I just pulled to the outside, and I went from like 9th to 2nd or 3rd in one straightaway before turn 1. And at that point, I was like, oh yeah. And I remember my crew chief, Sean Parker at the time, he was like, all right, bud, tires aren't holding you back here. Go get them. So that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. Like,
and that the competition was tough. I mean, there's a lot of guys. I don't remember all of them. I mean, I remember Keselowski and Frank Kimmel, of course, at the time was like the guy to beat.
We got to get him. That's a guy we're hoping to talk to. We got to talk to Frank.
Yeah, good guy.
Hey, everybody. We'll get right back to our amazing conversation with Brad Coleman. But first, I have to ask you, do you ever have like tired muscles like this one right here? I've been working out a little bit. And just some aching just joints, after a long day of activity, doing those chin-ups and riding your bike? If so, our friends at Blue Emu have you covered with a wide variety of maximum strength products that work fast and are completely odorless. That's right, you won't stink. Be sure to check out Blue Emu in its brand new look at major retailers near you. For maximum strength relief, gotta go with Blue Emu. Now let's get back to the podcast.
Your Busch Series stuff. So you did the Nashville race for Bruco in this, I believe, in the 37 car, and then you had one other start at Kansas. And just being that young and getting to move up into the Busch Series actually wasn't that crazy at the time, because it seemed like everybody was 18 and getting top rides in the Busch Series. But what was that experience like?
I mean, it was just super intimidating, but amazing at the same time. My first race was at Nashville, so I was confident going into it because I got second in the ARCA race there. But I had bronchitis like the week of it, of course, for my first ever race. But the ARCA race was 150 miles, and it was double that for the Busch race, which was by far the longest race I'd ever done, not counting like the 24 hours of Daytona, but you were switching drivers. So I remember just at the end of the race feeling like, wow, this is freaking hard. Like I was falling out of the seat. I mean, I was just 18 years old. I had like no muscle on me. And yeah, I think I got like 27th or something like that in that race. So I went from racing ARCA where I was getting top 5s, winning poles and stuff like that, to getting 27th in this race. And I'm like, okay, this is like next level. Like these drivers are actually really good.
Did you have to reset like expectations kind of going in and transitioning as you moved up? Because, like you said, the success came very quickly with your ARCA, stint, and you still had Sean as your crew chief in the Xfinity series at the time to kind of like help lean on and get some stability there. But did you have to readjust your expectations going into that?
Oh yeah, I learned that after the first race. Going in, I was like, all right, here we go. I'm gonna get top 10, top 5, and then reality hit of, oh wait. I mean, this was also the time when like 15 Cup drivers would be in the race every week, at least. So I was racing the best of the best in the series. It was pretty much like maybe Cup light is what I would call it. I mean, if you got top 15, you were in the Cup drivers. So yeah, it was a huge step up from ARCA where there was no Cup drivers at all.
Yeah, so I meant to ask you about that. Like at that time, like you say, like I believe there was a race I did at Chicagoland. I posted a fact about it where the 16th place car was the first non-full-time Cup car, and it was Jason Leffler. And at that time, like they could run for the championship if they wanted to. Like I believe there was 5 years in a row where a full-time Cup driver won the title, which is why they started limiting them. Do you think it's better now the way they do it, where they limited to 5 a year, or do you believe that they should be able to run as many as they want? Do you think that actually helped you at that age?
So I think it's a mixed bag. I think it's really cool to be able to get experience racing against Cup drivers before being in the Cup Series. But at the same time, you're getting like 16th or whatever if you don't beat the Cup drivers. So it's great experience, but you also don't. There's like, sports has levels where if you think of basketball, you're playing high school ball, then you move up to college, so much tougher, but you get years to like build up against that competition. And then you go into the NBA, and then you have another level where you have to build up to that. It's not like going from high school to NBA. Which is pretty much like going from ARCA to the Bush, what was Bush back then. I mean, you didn't really have much time to build up. I mean, you were just thrown in with the wolves pretty much.
No, I mean, it's interesting to see that because like you said, if you look at a college game, Brett Favre isn't going to be a quarterback in a college football game at the height of his career. Why do you see this in the Xfinity Series? But like to those expectations, when you're racing around them, you're still developing a lot of craft in your stock car racing abilities. Did you learn a lot from racing them or just being around them on track, or did that just kind of hinder you as well because it was just a little nerve-wracking?
It was definitely nerve-wracking. I remember being at Talladega, which first time to go super speedway racing, dear God.
Did you win the pole?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And you got to start in front of everybody now.
Yeah, that was great. I wish it just would have stayed up there all day. That would have been way more fun. Yeah, once I got just freight trained and was in the pack, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. But it took 16 laps for that to happen, so that was cool. I'm surprised I'm remembering all these numbers.
Drivers, you guys remember everything.
Yeah. Like I remember being in the race, having Tony Stewart behind me, who was my teammate at Joe Gibbs at the time. That was freaking nerve-wracking. I was like, I just want to pull out a line and get behind him so that Tony's not pushing me because I don't know what to do here.
Well, that says a lot, though, that Tony was willing to push you,
I think he was just trying to I was just the next guy in the way.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. He was just being a good teammate at that point, or he didn't want to lead.
I do remember at one point, there comes a point in the race where you just kind of just cruise in a pack. And like midway through the race, I had Carl Edwards behind me, and my spotter came on the radio after a couple laps. He was like, "Hey, Carl just wanted me to tell you you're doing a great job." I was like, "Oh," like that boosted my confidence so much that a competitor, he wasn't at Gibbs at the time, he was at Roush, would like go out of his way to be like, "Hey, tell a spotter to tell him he's doing a good job." Like,
he probably understands he was kind of in the situation not too long ago. He probably wanted to give you a good, positive boost there. It seemed like it did boost you a bit.
Yeah, and he came up after the race and said it again. That stuff like that means so much. So that's one of the really cool things about racing those guys at that level is when they do come up to you and say, "Hey, you did great." Like that really means a lot.
So, I mean, you alluded to it there. 2007, you get this opportunity with Joe Gibbs Racing, Carino's Italian Grill. That's always synonymous with you at that time in this ride. You are paired up with Jason Radcliffe. What was that like to work with Jason, who's at this time, he's working with a lot of drivers who are coming in and out of this ride, because you're not the only driver in the Joe Gibbs Xfinity ride. I think it's the number 18 at this point. Yeah.
Jason is such a good guy. I actually went to a race for the first time a couple of years ago, and when he was with Christopher Bell in the Nationwide or Xfinity Series, and I got to see him and hang out on the pit box, which was really cool. It was amazing. Being at Joe Gibbs Racing, it's an incredible organization, and the people, like as good as they are performance-wise, the people are like even better. just the friends that I made there that I'm still friends with. I had to be taken to the next level when I went there. If it was team meetings, if it was breaking down what the car was doing, they gave me this whole Excel spreadsheet for after every race where I would have to fill out, what did the car do at this point? What did it do at this point in the race? What did you think about the pit stops? What did you think about entry of turn one? Like all these different things that I had never done before. So they made me step up my game. They had trainers in the gym, like weightlifting and stuff like that, which I had never really done before. So I loved it. It was there's definitely pressure to perform though when you were there.
Definitely. And you had some really good runs though. You had, like you said, you mentioned the foreshadowing to Stephen Light. You finished second to him at Kentucky in 07, and you had a fourth at Milwaukee the next week, and some top 5 on road courses and stuff. But the one thing I want to ask you is, we see with road racers, like, so Kentucky, Milwaukee, you guys always seem, if you have a road racing background, to do really well on the flatter racetracks. And is that because those sort of sweeping corners feel like a road course? And then also, you guys are weirdly good at super speedway racing. Like Robbie Gordon, Wally Dallenbach, all these guys come in and they're good at super speedway racing, which is any similarity to driving an open wheel car? Like,
No.
yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, Milwaukee, I mean, that was like a road course corner, just super freaking long corner. Like you get in the corner, road courses, usually you're in the corner and you're out. And you have to get in hard on the brakes and get in the corner, and it felt like a road course. And then, okay, now I'm out of the corner. Like it was kind of like a road course, and then, but not really, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That makes total sense. I mean, the only thing I ever thought was like, you guys knew how to back the corner up a little more. So maybe you would, I don't know, save your tires and over the longevity of a run. But then again, I don't know, because road racers love to really brake hard and deep into the corners too. So I can't pinpoint.
Yeah, I was definitely one of the brake harder and deeper guys. I knew nothing about saving tires when I was doing that. I think it's more of a deal now, honestly. Like, I think just the level of competition and the knowledge and has just been stepped up. Like, that wasn't something we talked about. We never talked about that. We didn't have, big simulators like they do now. I didn't really watch much race footage. That wasn't really given to me much. It's just so different now. Like, it's the sport is studied so much more. But yeah, I remember that year, Mexico was actually my first ever race with Gibbs in Mexico City, which was a road course. And I was running in the top 5, and then the input shaft broke with like 20 laps to go or something. So yeah, I love the road courses. Those are my favorite for sure.
I mean, you went to the coolest road courses, because Mark and I highlighted this in the last episode. Obviously Mexico City, and then Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, and then Watkins Glen. 3 F1 tracks, if you want to be technical about it. I mean, what was it like to run on those, circuits in this Xfinity car, especially for the first time with Circuit Gilles Villeneuve?
Yeah, up in Montreal, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve was just like the ultimate thing for me. It was something I had played on video games so many times growing up in a Formula One car, seen it on TV, and we show up, and I remember our garage stall, the floor still was like painted from Formula One because they're still racing there, and it was a Ferrari F1 team. I was like, this is really cool. Like, I'm in the same garage as, I think it was like Kimi Räikkönen at the time, and I thought that was amazing. Getting out on the track is like driving a boat, because I remember talking to Jacques Villeneuve, who, of course, Formula One racer, won the Formula One championship. And I'm like, okay, so in the back straightaway, it's so long. We're doing like 185. And they have brake markers for the last chicane, which is really slow. They had to add brake markers for us. Like, usually they probably go to like 4 or 3, like 100 meters or whatever it means. And ours, we had to go to 7. So we're like, if you like made it to the 7, you were a hero. And I asked him, I'm like, where are you braking in a Formula One car? He's like, oh, like the 1.5. And they're doing 200 miles an hour. And the lap times, I did the quick calculation that Formula One cars would have lapped the nationwide cars every 3 laps.
Wow.
That's insane.
On a road course. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
even more so in the wet, probably, you know.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yeah, because they can actually see.
Yeah, like, so let's talk about that 2008 race in the rain. Just what was that like? Because you knew the rain was coming. Like, we saw the clouds and we saw the lightning in the background, and we're like, okay, this is not going to go well. And they bolt the rain tires on, those, what are they, 7-year-old Goodyear rain tires from like Trans Am or whatever, and they're like, let's give her, boys. So how did, like, when you had to throw the green, like, man, what was that like?
It was honestly, it was terrifying. I had raced in the rain in go-karts. I had raced a little bit in formula cars. So it really wasn't racing in the rain, wasn't scary to me. Racing in the rain in a car that is not built to do it, that doesn't have the safety stuff to do it, was terrifying. I mean, the mist, like the level of mist coming up, you could not see where you were going. On the back straight, where in the dry you're doing 185, I mean, I'm full speed on the back, and there's like a little kink. I can't see where I'm going, so I'm looking at the wall on my left, and like looking and seeing. And when it bends, I turn the wheel, like looking to the left because I couldn't see where I was going. And there's no wind. I don't think I had a windshield wiper. Like, we didn't get to practice in the rain at all. It was dry the whole time. So the first time any of us were in the rain was at the green flag. So it's like. It was terrifying.
Yeah, because I think it really gave those guys an advantage, like Fellows and Villeneuve, and like, because I think when they threw the green flag, 9 of the top 10 were road course ringers. So,
yeah.
And that's kind of how it ended up at the end of the day.
I think we might have started in the dry, because I think I was like 5th or 6th when the rain came out. And I mean, for some reason, my car was not liking it at all, and I just dropped like a rock.
Yeah. Is there like during the whole race, they spoke about like things to kind of prepare the car for these wet conditions, unhooking the sway bars, loosening it up like that? Was that just because your team, like you said, you've only practiced in the dry, you basically had only that notebook to base everything on? Could you just not like adapt to it essentially?
Yeah, pretty much. and the tires did nothing. And yeah, that was one race when they called it. I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, I don't think anyone complained about it ending early. I think everyone was down. It was like, whatever. Yep, go home. This is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only race that I was legitimately scared for my life in. Like, I was scared in it. I was like, okay, I want to make it to the end and live. Like, I want to make it. Something I thought was really cool, though. I mean, there was like 200,000 fans every year we went to Montreal. They love racing up there, and not one left when the rain came. I mean, if anything, more came. Like, they were all there when we left.
Yeah, they were equipped. They had their ponchos and their umbrellas. They were ready to go, you know, because if it rains on F1 weekend, it's a race. So, you know, I thought it was perfect, man. It was one of my favorite races of all time. And my boy Ron Fellows won. So, you know, it was a good race.
Good old Canadian winning in Canada.
Exactly. You know, and did you have those road courses kind of circled on the calendar though every year, or were you trying to really establish yourself more as like, I want to be a full-time stock car driver? But were you more like Ambrose, where you're like, Watkins Glen, that's for me right there?
So I wanted to be good at all of them. Like, I really did. I wanted to make it as a NASCAR driver. So you have to be good at all of them. But when we went to the road courses, the best way I could describe it is it felt like home field advantage, where it didn't actually feel like a race weekend, like pressure wise and nerves. It felt like I was just there for fun, because I knew that I would run well on it, and it was definitely circled. I mean, every time we went to road course, I'm like, let's have fun. We're gonna do really well.
See, that's awesome to think that when you're going to go to the track, you're just like loose, you're about to, you know, just go out there and have fun. And then, you know, success comes with like good energy. At this point, it's 2008. You're not with Joe Gibbs Racing, you're with Bruco in the Xfinity series, like we've mentioned. But you did have an interesting venture that was Joe Gibbs related in the Cup Series that year. You made a couple of starts in the 96, if I'm
One
not
start, I
mistaken.
believe.
One start,
Yeah,
excuse me.
one.
Yeah. So how did that come about? And during that time, it was a COT. So what was it like driving that car at a very fast, big track?
Yeah, Michigan, man, what a intimidating track for your first cup race and one of those things. It drove so different than a nationwide or I guess yeah, at the time it was nationwide car. They liked to be hung out sideways. That was not my style. So how the deal came about was towards the end of 2007. Um, Gibbs had stated that they wanted to find a way for me to like be at the team the next year. I'm pretty sure we talked about like a full-time deal, but something happened financially to where they couldn't find a sponsor. So we were left I was left at that point of, okay, how am I going to race? And that's when the Bruco approached me, which was then Baker Curb Racing, and Kleenex sponsorship, and offered the ride. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I see on Twitter every now and again, I'll get notifications, and there are people that are like, Brad Coleman, why did he leave Gibbs? Oh, he left Gibbs because he didn't want to do part-time anymore. He wanted full-time. What a selfish guy. That was a bad move. I'm like, nah, that's not why I did it. It was all about the money. Like, not the money I was making, but about the fact that there was no sponsorship and there was nothing there. So I went where there was a ride. And, but I signed that deal. And then at the same time, Hall of Fame Racing approached me about wanting to do a cup racing deal. So I remember I actually signed that deal. It was so cool. After the Memphis race, the Memphis Bush race, I go to this private airport, and I'm sitting in like this conference room in this private airport, meeting with the owners. We have the contract out. I signed the contract. We then like walk out onto the runway, get in this big private jet, and they fly me home. I'm like, this is freaking cool. And the next year I did testing with them, and helped just their test program. And then something happened. I don't remember what happened. And JJ Yaley was the driver, and they decided to pull him out and give me a shot at Michigan. And I think I started last and finished 38th because I didn't wreck.
It's hard at Michigan too, because, if you look at the stats, it's hard to, go a lap down, because normally the competition's pretty stiff, and normally people don't drop out of those races. So to make it all the way to the end that's hard, and that's the challenge. And I'm assuming that was the goal for you, is to complete as many laps as possible and finish the race.
Yeah, that was definitely the goal. Another goal was for me to pass one car, which I did not do.
Oh.
Like I'm not afraid. Like I don't have like a pride issue where I'm going to sit here and be like, I was the best driver. I just had the worst car. Like I could have done better, but also at the same time, the car was not just not
car was
easy
not
to
great.
handle. It was not fast. And that was validated when they pulled me out and put Ken Schrader in it at California, which is like very similar track. And he did the exact same thing. Like I think he qualified last or near last. He didn't pass anybody. He just ran in the back. So I was like, okay, good. That helps my confidence a little bit.
And why was it just a one race though, Brad?
There was things that happened where I was supposed to do Michigan. I was supposed to do Bristol the next week. I did Michigan. I think maybe they didn't think I was ready because of the way I performed in Michigan. So they put Ken Schrader in the car to help with development of it. And then Joey Logano and Home Depot came, and Joey ended up racing the car for the rest of the races that year that I think I was going to do. To get him ready to do like the full time in the 20 car the next year. Okay. And then after that, the team shut down. So
yeah, which is like at the beginning of the year, I think you were supposed to run a second car, right?
Yeah.
And that's always the killer, is when like the fledgling team not doing well is like, we're gonna have a second car this year. And you're like, yeah, sure. We'll see if you make it to the end of the year. But yeah, that's a tough situation. But then 2009 and 2010, you were with Gibbs again, in I guess the Nationwide Series at the time. And were that your minimum schedule? Was that kind of like cherry picked, or was that just filling in wherever they would put you in?
That was I'm excited to be doing this interview because I can share like the truth behind things and not have to be like PR answers.
Yes.
Being 10 years out. That was me and my dad, who, when I say we, he was like my manager, so that's the we. We found sponsorship, which you had to have it starting after '07. Um, we found sponsorship. We went to Gibbs. We're like, what do you got? And they said, here are the races, and we said, okay.
Yeah.
So that was how that was picked.
So it was just kind of like, did you have opportunities maybe with like a smaller, less successful team to run more races, or was it that you wanted to just try and go win some races?
Honestly, I wanted to go win races, and after 2008, okay, so 2007 is my rookie year. I have some good races. People are talking about, oh, Brad Coleman, he's going to do good things. So I'm super confident. I'm excited. The next year in '08, the car, it's just not as good as the Gibbs car, what I race. So I go from running in top 10, top 5 sometimes to uh, top 15's a win kind of performance. And that really just, as a 20-year-old, hit my confidence big. So I wanted to go. And then the thing with Hall of Fame racing happened at the end of the year. So I really wanted to prove to myself that I could actually do it, run well. So we went back to Gibbs.
So when you went back to Gibbs, were there a lot of the same kind of people and places during that Xfinity series, or did things look different, and did it take a little bit of readjustment to kind of feel like you were fitting back in at Gibbs?
It was only 1 year between when I was there in '07 and then going back in '09, but a lot had changed in that they went from Chevy to Toyota. And in 2008, their Toyota nationwide cars were dominant, like amazing, ton of power. They figured something out chassis wise. So I went from like 2007, they had good Busch cars, but they weren't dominant. And then 2008, they figured that out. 2009, I was like, okay, these are good cars. And I raced in the 18 car, who had their set crew. When I came back in '09, I was in the 20 car, which was a totally different crew chief. It was Dave Rogers instead of Jason Radcliffe. So there was familiarity in the team, but there was also learning. I mean, I knew those guys, but there was learning how to work with them.
2010, you also got, the road course experience. You got to go to Road America, which would have been a track that you'd had experience at that most people didn't have any experience at. And if, like me, you were really compartmentalized with just watching kind of NASCAR at the time, you might not have even know existed if you didn't watch other series, right? So what was it like to go to Road America, though, for that first race?
I loved it. It's a sweet track. I had experience on it from racing there when I was 16 in a Formula car. I didn't remember anything from it. I had no notes. So it was like going to it brand new. And because every time you go, at least back when I drove, when you went to a new track, you had an extra day of testing just to get used to it, to get the cars ready for it. So we had an extra day of testing out there. We were like top 5 the whole time. So I loved it. It was one of those weekends where it was like vacation for me, just having a blast racing. I remember the Toyota would have meetings where all their drivers would get together after practice sessions from all the different Toyota teams and talk. And I was like fastest. So we had a meeting and all the drivers were like, okay, what are you doing in this corner? What are you doing in this corner? I'm like, why would I share my secrets? Like,
but there's no manufacturer orders in NASCAR, right? That's what fans always say. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm not going to share any of this.
So was that kind of like one of those things where it's just like, okay, the writing's on the wall here that maybe it's time to step back a little bit, or did that just come towards the end of 2010 when the races just were kind of just drying up, and an opportunity probably wasn't there from sponsorship side to continue?
Yeah, so starting to get real with y'all, starting in 2008, I started to get in this like mental funk just because all of a sudden my performance wasn't there. I mean, I guess you could classify it as like a slight depression or something like that. 2009 was helped a little bit, but I still just felt off. 2010 still felt off, and then at the end of 2010, there was no sponsorship, so there was no ride. So for 2011, I had nothing. Like I was just watching racing on TV. I was going to races, and I was just in this funk, and I was even questioning, should I even be doing this anymore? Why is this all happening? And then finally found a sponsor towards the end of 2011 that we were going to announce for 2012. And I was going to go race with Roush Fenway, who had a really good nationwide program then. And like the day before we're going to announce the sponsor and the deal, the sponsor called up and was like, "Hey, we can't do it. We got to pull out." So after all of that happened, and I was like, that to me is confirmation. I'm just burnt out. So I'm just going to call it.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot too to deal with. Like, you know, you're going to the highest point where it's like you're probably not trying to get your expectations too high before this announcement comes in, but the realization of that is like, oh, I'm gonna get to come back and have really another chance and a really competitive ride, and it just kind of gets swept out from under you so quickly. That high and low, like, you know, just being real with us, like what does that, you know, feel to you? How do you have to like overcome that, and how much time did it take you to overcome that?
Yeah, so something I had to relearn once I got out of racing was how to have hope, hope for situations, because there'd be so many times where there'd be a sponsor. Oh, we're interested. Let's meet. We would have meetings. We would put together. We would design the cars. We would get close to signing a deal, and they would say, we can't do it. It's not right. I mean, that happened. It had to be in the hundreds of times where we would go through that with sponsors, and I'd get hope. It's the one, and then it wouldn't happen. So I got to the point where I'm like, oh, a sponsor is available or wants to talk. Okay. And I just kind of lost hope in that situation. So I had to relearn how to have hope, and that you're actually supposed to have hope in life. I didn't watch racing for 5 or 6 years after I stopped. Now I love it. Like I'm fully back in it, watching it. I'm watching every race I can, watching the Formula One season, watching NASCAR, just loving it. So I'm good now.
That time allowed you to appreciate it more or less, and you got, like you said, to totally disconnect from the world of racing. I mean, that's good. What did you do from that time period when you like totally unplugged from racing?
Oh man. So one of my sponsor in 2010 was Safeway Driving Centers, which is a driving school in Houston, Texas, which is driver's ed, like 15-year-olds, and also adult training, corporate training. Me and my family actually bought that company from the owner. So when I went home after racing, I went back to Houston. I worked there. I was literally a driving instructor for 15-year-olds, which, by the way, is way more terrifying than any race I've ever been in. But I learned how to control a car from the right side, grabbing the wheel. But I then got myself to where I was certified to actually train the instructors, which, funny enough, my skill set made me a really good instructor and trainer with what I had learned in racing. And then we needed some training videos for our online curriculum. So for fun, I went out with an iPhone and I shot some training videos, and they actually turned out pretty good. So I ended up for the next 3 years being our video guy and making hundreds of training videos. And ever since then, my career has actually been making videos for companies and people, and I'm a photographer as well.
Wow, what a small world! All three of us.
All three of
Photography,
us
video,
make videos
people.
and shoot photos.
Yeah.
Still using an iPhone or what?
Yeah.
No, I'm not shooting on the iPhone anymore. My stills camera is a Canon 5D Mark IV.
Oh, very nice.
And my video setup right now is a Panasonic GH5S.
Oh,
which
me too! Oh my god!
Yeah, man. I'm looking to upgrade it. I'm looking to get into the cinema camera world.
It's so good to meet other Lumix people.
So what cinema camera is on your radar? You got Black Magic or something else?
What I want is a red. That's what I want.
Ooh,
It's worth the
hot
money.
shot.
I don't know if it makes sense right now, but that's what I want. And yeah,
It's
I'll
worth.
update y'all when I get a rig.
Yeah, it's
Be
worth
nice
the
to
money,
see.
man. It is for the name alone. Because if you
Yeah.
say to a guy in a boardroom that you have a red cam, they don't know what that is, but they know that it's good.
It
So
I'll just show
justifies
up.
every
I'll just show
invoice
up with
too.
it.
yeah,
Look at
Yeah.
this camera. This is what I have. They made Avengers with this. Hire me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you have to get a new laptop so they can process the footage.
Oh
But
yeah.
going back to racing, we don't want to nerd everybody out with our camera stuff. We could talk about that forever. But yeah, like testing. So I want to ask about testing because when we talked to Landon Castle, like he's kind of known as like the testing guy because he did every sort of testing you can imagine.
Yeah.
I assume when you were with Gibbs and you did the Hall of Fame stuff that you were like the proving grounds guy probably, and you had to go and do the 5 mile oval test where for all day. Like, so just tell us about some of those stories. We won't ask you about the coyote either. We won't ask about that.
That's the only story I have from that that's not boring. You said it. You said 5 mile oval. The Toyota one was 10 miles.
What?
So
You're just wide open for 10 miles.
10 miles, and all there is, you're in the middle of the desert in Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a guardrail, like a highway guardrail is the outside wall of this track. So that's how, when you're testing, a coyote just slips right in and just jumps out. Yeah.
I've seen the
Now,
photos; they're quite graphic. But
now, how
Yeah.
fast did you get
A
that?
lot of people, it was fun watching all the people that think it was photoshopped. I can verify there was no photoshopping whatsoever. That guy had horrible timing and just stepped right out. I mean, I was doing like 198. It was restrictor plate package. So I'm doing 198 and he was hundreds of yards ahead of me. But when you're going that speed, it's just like that. He slipped out and all I had time to do was go, and that was it. And I hit him like it registered in the telemetry like a G or two, the impact, like when I hit him. And all of a sudden the temperature gauge spikes. It starts to smoke like crazy and it smells awful. I looked in my mirror after I hit him. I didn't see his body anywhere. I was like, wow, wonder where he went. I came on the radio. I was like, guys, I hit a coyote. I don't know how bad the damage is. I'm coming in. And I pull in the pits. And as soon as I pull in, everyone's jaw drops and they start freaking out. And I get out as quick as I can to see that poor guy. I feel bad because I didn't want to, like, there was nothing I could do. Like, I didn't go out there
Yeah.
trying to kill a coyote.
But it's
Yeah,
like,
that's
you know,
like, yeah.
like you said, at that speed, you have no time to react. And even if you try to react, you're only going to put yourself in danger now because now you're going to turn left or turn right to avoid them, then turn right back left into a guardrail, you know, a highway guardrail. It's
I would've
totally
gone
not
through.
safe to hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that ruined the rest of that test day.
I can imagine, yeah.
At the Toyota Proving Grounds, one of my best buddies when I was racing, so two of my best friends were Matt DiBenedetto and Landon Castle. Story about Matt, we were out at the Toyota Proving Grounds. The first ever bump that he felt in a cup car in drafting was from me. So I'm super proud about that because he's doing so good. Like, I'm so pumped up for Matty D, what he's done in his career, the way he's fought for it. He's always worked so hard. Landon, y'all did an interview with Landon, like you said, and I saw like a short clip that y'all took out where he was talking about this time when he woke up and Chad Canals was like, hey, come to the track. We got to go now. Landon was at that morning was actually supposed to go to a golf tournament for some charity. And so I get a text that morning, like, hey, I have to go do an emergency test. Can you please like go to this golf tournament in my name, like replace me in this golf tournament and go do this charity deal? I was like, sure. So while he was off doing that, I was playing golf.
There you go. Yeah, man, like that the coyote thing, it's just like he's got one car to avoid. It's not like he's running across a highway and he does the worst possible timing, you know? Like, God, that's
Well,
just
he didn't hear anything, you know, he thought it was past, but
Something else you had to look out for was either falcons or hawks that would sit on the guardrail and watch you drive by. Like they're just sitting there. And sometimes they would try to swipe at the car, which I don't know why.
you look
I
like
mean,
a vole or something. Like what?
But they would try to go for the windshield. I'm like, what are these guys doing? Like, I don't want a falcon coming through my windshield. The day that I hit the coyote, I had actually hit like 6 rattlesnakes and probably 5 or 6 quail right on the quail right on the windshield. So they're all on the ground. Like when you're driving a road car, you drive up to them, they fly off, right? Well, when they don't anticipate you going 200 miles an hour, so when they take off, they go straight into the windshield. So there were so many times when they would take off, and I would literally like duck just because of your reaction. I'm like, oh, and then there's just quail all over the windshield. It was a bad day for animals there.
Yeah.
But did you ever do any of that stuff that Landon talks about where like you try to see how long you could close your eyes for when you're like, and stuff like that, or see how long you could take your hands off the wheel at those proving ground tracks?
I never did that. I never did that. I never took my hands off the wheel. I did close my eyes. I did take selfies with my phone.
While going 198 miles an hour in a restricted plate package.
Yeah, I have pictures like of me, and I have pictures of the speedometer. I mean, you could have done it. Like anybody could have driven that car.
Do you listen to tunes and stuff while you're out there to kill the time, or what?
No, they didn't have. I mean, I don't know why I didn't. I don't know why I didn't put a headphone or something in. They didn't have AirPods or any of that back then. But yeah, I mean, the phone I had was like an iPhone 3. Like a 3GS or something. So yeah, way back in the day.
That's just hilarious that you could actually still be able to carry that in the stock car. And then how would you fish that out? Would that just be like right by the shifter, or would that be like right by the pillars on the side of the door in like a pocket, and you would just like slide it out?
I'd put it between my legs.
Now they got pockets in the fire suits for phones and stuff. Like that's an innovation that's built in now. So, all my guys have the pockets right here, and they can hold their phone and their snacks and everything when they walk around.
Right.
So,
yeah, I didn't have that. It's crazy, man. It's been so long since I've raced that now I'm looking back at like, it's getting to the point now where I look back at the cars I raced and they look old. And I look at my helmet compared to helmets now and it looks old. I'm like, dang.
It's just trends and styles. They come and go. But, some things are timeless. I mean, like this episode, hopefully it's timeless. But wrapping it up, I guess, really, Brad, what are some highlights from your career that you look at kind of thinking about it now that are just like, wow, I can't believe I got the opportunity to do that, or you're just so proud that you got to do it, kind of being able to reflect back on it?
When I reflect back on my career, every part of it, I look back and I go, wow, I can't believe I got to do that. And at the same time, like, there's just this level of familiarity. Like when you're a NASCAR driver, you just get used to it. And now I look back and I go, dang, I did some really cool things, like really cool things. I got to race at Daytona in a stock car. I got to race at 24 Hours of Daytona. I got to race on Formula One tracks in Mexico City and Canada. I got to race these Daytona prototypes, these Porsche GT cars, these Pro Mazdas, and I got to meet Peter Frampton or ZZ Top or hang out with people like that. Like that's really cool. And so now I'm married. Now I have a son who's like 5 months old. It's cool that I get to one day I'll get to like share all that with him and just teach him about those things. I have nothing but just good memories or like good feelings when I look back on racing. There's some crappy stuff that happened, but there's no bitterness whatsoever. Like it was awesome. It made who I am today. Like I would not be who I was. Like I would have gone to college, which that's kind of, in my opinion, I'm doing fine without college. Instead of that, I raced. So while my friends were going to class, I was racing cars. That was really cool. And then now I'm getting to do something I love. I loved racing. Now I'm doing something else I loved with filmmaking and photography. And if you go to pierceandwilder.com, that's my company, you can check out. I just started a new company with a buddy of mine. I love people. I love hanging out with people. I got to meet amazing people in racing, which kind of like spawned my desire to hear people's stories because like there's just crazy stories that people have. So I like capturing that with cameras now.
That's why we started doing this, man. Same thing. So we could just hear people's stories and you know, and tell them to maybe people that don't know. Like we've had some interesting people on, and now including yourself. So it's been awesome to chat, man. Really appreciate it. And thank you for joining the Flashback to the Track podcast presented by Blue Emu. So if you ever need any Blue Emu for your aches and strains when you're out shooting, Matt or Brad, let us know, and we can probably hook you up with that. So yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, that's a company I've never heard of until this year with Landon. They're just blowing up.
Available at Walmart. They're the official pain relief product of NASCAR and Major League Baseball. So
yeah.
Gosh, I remember what it's like to be you in that situation, saying those things.
Yeah, it's an interesting point right now because it's like, I don't know, at some point it's gonna be weird, but yeah.
Well, good for y'all though for having like sponsorship. That's amazing. Keep going, man.
It's
been trying.
Really cool, man, especially with how small a following we have, that they wanted to hook up with us. So it's awesome. It's been fun. It's been cool. Give us something to do in our free time. It's something that we love doing. So thanks again for joining us, man, and we will see you hopefully somewhere down the line.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
All right. Take care.